The kid who grew up in the streets of Peoria when mother was a whore. His dad was a pimp. Come on. Guys beat the shit out of him. What did that do? Eliminated all the bullshit. Richard had a view of life that was always based on truth. You distort the truth, you make fun of the truth, you bend the truth, you twist the truth, you run over the truth, but there has to be truth in it.
It's an amazing thing, actually.
Diversity.
Cincinnati.
This is incredible.
It got more and more serious to find out like who this guy was.
Hello, this is Chuck Braverman on the latest episode of Westdoc Online. This, I believe, is episode number 25. And if you're watching this on somewhere other than Westdoc Online, you know, like YouTube or something like that, please like and subscribe, which I never say, which I guess I should now, so you'll be notified. There's a little bell icon there that'll just tell you when a new episode comes up. So I'm going to put these on YouTube moving forward. Today, it's interesting thinking about how do I find the talent that I have for this show. And this particular episode is not that different, except I saw a trailer for a film and I thought, gee, that looks pretty good. And I did a little research and got a hold of the film, and of course the film paid off. There's an old saying, I used to make trailers, and I remember they used to say sometimes the better the trailer, the worse the movie, and vice versa, but in this case it's not so. The film is I Am Richard Pryor. I believe that it's currently running on the Paramount Network, and we'll find out from sure when we speak to the director-writer, Jesse James Miller. And there you are. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm seeing you. I'm in Southern California, and you are in Vancouver, I believe. Is that right?
I'm actually on the Sunshine Coast, which is right near Vancouver. Well, I'm from Vancouver, but I'm just visiting family on the weekend.
Oh,
as you can hear the birds right there.
What's the Sunshine Coast? Is that the name of a town or an area or what?
It's actually parallel to the Vancouver Island. It's part of the mainland, but it's just a hidden secret that we don't want too many people to understand, so they don't come here in droves, which they already do. So
I told you when we had a brief phone conversation that I spent a month in Vancouver directing an episodic show, and it was just a spectacular, wonderful, beautiful city. I guess we shouldn't tell anybody that because you don't want to. It's like,
well,
LA.
it's already overrun, so the bag is out. It's done.
Housing used to be really cheap and available everywhere, right? And now it's like little condos are $1 million plus, right?
Yeah. No, Vancouver is definitely discovered. For sure.
So, Jesse, I'm looking at your bio, and it says you were born of American hippies in 1970 on a remote island. And then you made a film about your American exodus, My American Exodus. Tell me about, and I'm fascinated by your name too. I'm sure people have asked you before. How did your name, and I'll let you tell me the name of your children, which are unusual also.
Well, draft dodger, conscientious objector as a father who and a mother from Santa Monica. So they took off during the draft, and I was born on Malcolm Island, which is pretty far up the coast, in a little island called Santula. And my name, well, I don't know. I got to blame it on my parents, Jesse James Evan Miller. James was a friend of my dad's who passed away recently. But that's about all I got for my name. I got to blame it on my parents. My oldest son is Cian Miller, and my youngest is Keen Miller. So I have the traditional angle of confusing people to carry forward.
So you're unusual in that, and I discovered this after the fact because we don't know each other before the last couple of days, is that you're a hybrid, really. I noticed that, yeah, and there are very few of us, and I'm very proud of the fact that I'm a hybrid too, and that is somebody who is proficient in fiction as well as nonfiction.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that, especially after I saw the list of fantastic documentaries that you've directed, and very high quality and beautifully shot and wonderfully put together. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the Richard Pryor doc and how that came about, and maybe some of the production notes, and then I'll run the trailer for you.
Sure. How it came about is I just was offered the gig, which is fortunate for me. Every once in a while I get offered something that I don't have to create from conception. It was a tough one to say yes to at first because Richard's been, there's I think 3 prior docs on his life, and B, just he's super layered, super complex. In order to tackle any story, I gotta sort of really get engrossed in it. So it was one of those decisions that took me a couple weeks to say yes to, but it was just because of the complexity of the subject that I was more concerned about in terms of me diving into. As Chuck said, I'm a hybrid filmmaker, I guess we call ourselves now. I'm not quite sure what to call myself. I go from nonfiction to fiction all the time, and it's just been the way it's worked over the years. So for my doc filmmaking experiences, I want to try to bring my theatrical kind of conceptions, reenactments sometimes, as in Wonder Woman and etc. So that was really an interesting part of the Pryor experience, was wanting to bring Richard's voice into the story, because I just noticed that there's so much archive of him on his records and interviews and talking and the movies, and he just said it was such a crossover genius that I wanted to bring that in. So it enabled me to sort of film sort of little sections of him at the radio station in Berkeley, and so I could, we didn't have a big budget, but I could film kind of the placeholders for that story to take place.
So let's take a look at the trailer, and then we can comment on it.
Sometimes I feel like there's a person, Richard Pryor, and he does all this comedy. And then there's me, and I wonder what I have to do with Richard.
One of the most brilliant comedy minds in existence, Mr. Richard Pryor.
I'm looking at an oblivious genius.
Richard Pryor is not conservative by any stretch of the imagination.
Richard had a view of life that was always based on truth. You distort the truth, you make fun of the truth, you run over the truth, but there has to be truth in it.
My father died fucking. My father came and went at the same time.
It so moves an audience to find a performer who shares their vulnerability with you.
They're laughing, but also suddenly you're a raw nerve.
This ain't as funny as we thought it was gonna be.
It's a kid that grew up in the streets of Peoria. His dad was a pimp. His mother was a whore.
Hello, little boys. Your mother home? I'd like a blowjob.
As soon as he's off stage, he really didn't know how to operate in the world. Drugs allowed him to be something other than himself with the memory of that childhood.
I was told by many people that this is a troubled artist, and you should stay away from him.
I didn't get caught yesterday buying 7 pounds of cocaine in front of 8 policemen.
The phone drops. Richard had run through the kitchen on fire.
So what's that? Richard Pryor running down the street.
One day he got up and go, you know what? This is bullshit. I have some stuff to say.
I could have been prejudiced.
Pimps, poverty, racism. He took all that dark shit and made it light.
He kicked the freedom of speech door wide open.
That was a hidden world that people didn't know about. And Richard Pryor put it on wax and made it beautiful.
Take me now, Lord, take me now. God, save my life, take me, take me, take me.
He made us all realize that we're humans, and that's the brilliance of Richard.
What you taking my picture for?
He turned out to be kind of a genius to turn your pain into comedy.
I feel the tension from y'all. Y'all want me to do so well. But let's relax and enjoy whatever the fuck happens.
There you go.
It brings back, having just watched the film, it was actually a sad film.
Yeah.
It was exciting to watch because you had some great clips of Pryor, and I learned a great deal. Even though I was always a big fan of his, I had forgotten things about him, and his humor is just so good. And yet, it's, as Rocco said in the clip there's just such an element of truth in everything that he was saying. It's heavy.
Yeah, well, I mean, Rocco was great. Yeah, Pryor's a heavy guy, man. I mean, he was doing stuff back 50 years ago, 40 years ago that just, even today is relevant. So whenever you can pull somebody out of history like that and realize that they're saying stuff that's relevant today, it's just mind-boggling, and that's the genius of Pryor.
Well, it's funny. It's kind of funny in a way that when you look at something that's, can't do the math right away, but some of his stuff was 40 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And you think, what? Wow, did he say that? Did he do that?
Yeah.
Did anybody say that or do that 40 years ago? Because we're still pushing the boundaries here of, I guess we go back and forth, being more or less.
Yeah, not much has changed. I mean, that's one of the shocking. I think at South by Southwest at the screening, we screened the feature version, which I prefer. Nothing against the cut down version, but it's hard on a filmmaker when you cut 30 minutes out of a film on him or her. Yeah, it was a stunned audience. I mean, it's a heavy film, and Pryor was a heavy guy. He was joking about stuff that happened to him personally, and it hurt him, But there's lots to learn from this man now. There's a few, Martin Luther King and these types of icons. We can go back in their work and we can go, hey, this is relevant now. Like, what were they saying? What should we be listening to? And we should be listening to people like Pryor,
The photographing of the interviews was so well done and so nicely put together. And it also seemed to me, after watching the whole film, that a lot of people that you photographed were in large open spaces, some kind of a warehouse setting, some a very large apartment. I mean, did you rent space to photograph these people?
Yeah.
How did that?
Yeah. Well, that's all style platform. I try and create a motif for each one of my films as much as possible. So with Pryor, I felt like he was elegant as a person and in his art, and I wanted to not just go to comedy clubs and do the regular. So a lot of those were sets that we built. It is tough, man. It's tough because halfway through your shooting, all of a sudden you're like, what is this place we're about to shoot in? So, we brought in panels and art deck and couches and the whole 9 yards for a lot of those interviews, and built in the background. to keep the motif going.
Well, it definitely had a great look to it, which was terrific. The DP was
Sean Lawless and a couple others. I work with these guys for a number of years now, and Sean just did Punk with me, and which was a completely, different look. It's important for me. I think the tone for me is really important. I don't mean this to stomp on anybody's. It just, for me, it's really important for a doc to look good. Those days are over for me personally, where there's a non-lit situation. I just like lighting stuff and making it look beautiful. That's just my way.
So out of curiosity, from a director's point of view, producer, director, when you go to shoot any one of those people and they all had a great look to them, you get there at 9 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock, and what time are you ready to shoot? How long does it take you to set up your crew, and how big is your crew?
Well, we do a full prep day before. We fly in with enough time to do location scouts. So on the location scouts, we spend our time planning out the look and the camera angles the day before. Sound's always an enemy of documentary filmmaking, so that's taken into context. So I travel with the sound person and my DP and an AC. By the time we show up the next morning, it's usually a 3 or 4 hour lighting setup. And depending on the day, I try and keep them minimal to two interviews a day at the most. Back in the day, it used to be 1 interview a day. Now it's like producers try and get 3 in there because they're whittling down. It costs a lot of money for the day. I'd say prior we had crews of 13 to 15. On Punk, we were up there about 18 to 20.
Wow. What did the crew consist of? That's 15 people to 20 people. You mean grips, gaffers, makeup, hair, wardrobe?
Yeah, pretty much all those I just said with ACs. And
boy, you're going to upset a lot of these, of do-it-yourself.
Well, I come
two-man crews,
I do that too, I don't want to. These are just specific to the films you're talking about. I mean, Exodus I shot for $3,000, and I shot it. I did everything. I was just by myself. So that's where I come from. I'm also an editor, so I've cut most of my stuff except for Graham Q, who's a fantastic editor, and I hate to say his name out loud because I don't want to get poached. But he cut Pryor, and he was instrumental in a lot of the style. Sean Tozer, who's been working with me for, 12 years, is my composer. Not mine, but a composer, I should say, is super, super talented. So I just work with really talented people.
So living in Canada, and you're a dual citizen, I believe. Is it, how is the, you seem to be really busy. Are half the projects, would you say, Canadian, or does it not matter one way or the other, or how does that work for you?
It's tough no matter where you live in the world, I mean, I think documentary and filmmakers in general, we're just blessed to be making films. In Canada, we do have a system in place for tax credits that is attractive, but that over the years that's changed with Atlanta and different states, Georgia and different states coming up with their tax breaks. So it's way more competitive now than it used to be. But I work wherever I can, whenever I can, however I can.
So I have a clip here from a film, which I realized after the fact is a couple of years old, but it's a dramatic film, Becoming Redwood. Do you want to say anything about, and by the way, I had another bio on you. Did I read somewhere that you were a golfer yourself before? Is that
Yeah.
correct? Yeah. And I bring this
Yeah.
up. I should have left my clubs out in the back here. That I am a brand new golfer at
Well, you're foolish.
my young age. I literally just started a couple of months ago and played my first
you should
real
give
game
up.
on a real course. What day is today? Like 4 days ago with my brother. I mean, literally. I've been going to the driving range and taking instructions, and something bit me, the golf bug.
Oh, God help you. Let's roll Redwood, and I'll tell you the story after.
Here we go. Whoops. I'm going to restart.
Why don't you help me make dinner? We're having short ribs.
No thanks. I don't eat meat.
Oh.
Red, you keep your nose out of things that don't concern you.
I would prefer redwood, please.
Who's this little pecker?
This is Redwood.
Since when do hippies roam the links?
Remember, Redwood, you win the Masters, and we
can change everything. If I can beat Jack, I'll be able to win that magical jacket. Then I'll be able to change everything back to the way it was before. Back to when my dad was happy.
He's crazy like cramps.
Bigger bulls.
Richardson! Yeah!
So, what's the story on that? Did you write that too?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was about 14 years of, it took me from conception to getting it made.
And
Brings back a lot of memories.
I looked it up on IMDb Pro. The budget seemed to be incredibly small budget, right? Was it correct?
I think that budget on an IMDb is inflated even from what we actually made.
I think it says $100,000.
That's Rabbit. Yeah, that's Rabbit.
Oh.
Which was $100,000.
Which I looked at the trailer of that too, and that looks pretty good for $100,000. But then again, you're going. I don't understand. You're doing documentaries. You have 20 guys on a crew, and how many days did you shoot on Pryor or Punk? You're up there in the good higher altitudes of the doc budget world.
Yeah.
More than your little feature films, right? And some of your features.
Yeah.
So were you a golfer? Is that how Redwood came about? I mean,
yeah, I turned pro when I was 19. Had a brief, extremely non-productive professional career. Had a nervous breakdown at 22. Just golf is a complicated subject for me, but Redwood is about me growing up. It's a totally biographical, kind of fictional, additional take to me growing up, thinking that I was gonna get my family back together by beating Jack Nicklaus in my mind. Yeah.
I don't want to get off on a tangent on golf, but my brother keeps saying, "Now don't get uptight if you do." And I said, "I am playing golf because I'm enjoying every minute of it. I'm not trying to."
Yeah, well,
I'm not becoming a pro. I'm just trying to hit the ball straight, right? It's kind of weird.
It's a very complicated relationship. That's all I gotta say. I mean, God rest Albie Thompson, who just passed away, but look him up. He was my guru and taught me life lessons that I still have been using today.
Chasing Evil. How did that come about?
The Robbie Knievel story?
Yeah.
It's 12 o'clock.
Oh, it's 12 o'clock. Like any doc, I had a bunch of in development, and a broadcaster picked that one, and that's what we greenlit with Adam Skirgy, who's a fantastic producer, Ken Johns, who produced it and shot it. We we set out and made that film, which was, you know, extremely difficult. But it did really well, and proud of that film.
Let's take a quick look.
I have had over 350 professional jumps. I hold over 20 world records. You name it, I've jumped it. Since I started my career at 8 years old.
I'm doing an interview.
I am the greatest jumper of all time. My name is Robbie Knievel. And in my business, you gotta know what the you're doing or you end up dead.
He is a legend. He's did jumps as nobody else has ever done. You know, he jumped across the Grand Canyon, jumped over a train coming at him, jumped building to building. He made his own way.
He was the ratings draw before American Idol. It was Robbie Knievel. He built up this tremendous empire chasing after his father's legacy.
Yeah.
It seems like a change of pace, not quite like golf or stand-ups.
Well, Robbie's one of a kind, man. He's a Knievel.
And was he actually living in a trailer there when you?
Yeah.
And what does he do? He goes from venue to venue in the trailer to do jumps, or does he have a life, a family, or do you?
Robbie, in the film, he jumped. He injured himself on the jump that we were filming. You know, first Daredevil to live and perform for 5 decades, which has never been done and unheard of. He's not jumping right now. I think that he's in recovery with his back. He broke his back when we were filming him. It's a tough life, man.
That's a hard way to hard to make a living. That harder than even documentary filmmaking, right?
Listen, I mean, I stood on his jump ramp the night before he jumped, and I just could not believe that somebody would do that for a living. It's just a special breed of person.
I have a project that I've had in development for a couple of years with somebody that does dangerous stuff, and I thought it was going to happen, and then it fell through the project. And I was actually relieved almost that I didn't have to produce a show with somebody doing a stunt that was life-threatening.
Well, it's a weird situation because you become friends with that person sometimes, and watching them go through that is difficult. As a filmmaker, it's a real double-edged sword, really. I felt that way with Ray. Sorry, go ahead.
You want to tell us a little bit about the Punks project and how that came about, and a little bit about the shooting, and then I'll run a clip from that.
Sure. It's currently, the way I'm looking right now, fatigued, is because I'm just delivering the 4th episode this week. It's 4 1 hours of sort of like a quasi-history of punk from Iggy Pop to now. We've got an amazing cast. I think I did 61 interviews or create something crazy like that. But pretty proud of it. Everybody should see it.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Build it myself. It's like if you get into punk rock to make money, you're really in the wrong business.
You know, guys going crazy.
MC5.
The Stooges, the Ramones, the Sex Pistols. Each generation is looking for its own voice.
Let's break all the rules.
I want to do something different.
This is who I am.
I always thought it was an attitude.
So messed up. I want you.
You have to fucking let the kids take over.
That's a lot of what has allowed punk to keep being reborn.
I want you here.
All that mattered to me was the motivation of the person that's playing the music.
This is what I like.
See your dog.
Couldn't be much different than the other material that we've been looking at, which is great that you're so eclectic. I mean, can you tell us about the production in that show?
God, it's been an amazing experience. When I got the job, I didn't. I mean, I knew about punk music, but I didn't really understand it, and now I do. Counterculture people are usually on the fringes for a reason, and they're extremely intelligent and complex. The stories are complex, and it's just been a huge honor to be part of this project, because one of the things that I think people don't understand is that getting these people together in one documentary was unheard of. And they all came together finally after all these years.
Well, how did you get them all together? I mean,
I think Iggy Pop being the exec producer probably helped a lot. You know, he's the Godfather, right? So once you get the Godfather, everybody sort of falls in line. We got Johnny Rotten, we got Marky Ramone. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And the stories that, I mean, we did 4 1 hours, but I can honestly tell you that I shot enough for 10 1 hours.
And are you cutting where? In Canada?
Yeah, we're just delivering the 4th episode out of 4. Production was all over the States and London. We went to London, of course.
So you mentioned
post-production was.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Post-production was in Vancouver.
So you mentioned having Iggy Pop as the exec, and I noticed that on the Pryor doc there were like 10 producers plus his. Is her name Jennifer? No.
Jennifer, yeah.
Was the exec producer his ex-wife, or maybe
yeah.
What was that like? How did that influence the making of the film? Obviously, I would imagine it opened doors to some interviews, but what was her participation or lack thereof? May I ask? Sure,
no problem. Before we go there, I just want to mention that John Varvatos was hugely influential and amazing to deal with on punk, so that helped a lot. Jennifer was instrumental in telling that story. She's just an amazing person. Was great to work with on Richard's doc. It's extremely complex, these documentaries, putting them together with the estates and with family and stuff like that. So that's what happens when you get into these high-end kind of high-profile characters. And Jen was able to help me get through, or production help production get through the landmines that come with telling these stories.
Yeah, she was a terrific interview. I mean, and you could
amazing.
You could feel the emotion inside of her, and it wasn't just something she had said 100 times, and it wasn't just it was very real.
Well, she went there with me, so hats off.
Was music clearance on the punk thing a nightmare, or when you got so and so, did it come with music clearance, or was that?
It's all a nightmare, Chuck.
Well, we know that.
It's all a nightmare. Yeah, it's really complex, man. I mean, it's just documentary filmmaking. I don't think people understand how complex it really is. How many elements are moving and around, and when you see a film, it's okay to be critical of something, but you also have to, take your hat off to these filmmakers who are actually presenting to you something that is sometimes takes 4, 5, 10 years to make because it's so complex.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to be on this episode of Westdoc Online.
My pleasure.
I hope you and all the viewers who are watching this enjoy it, and tell all your friends so they'll watch and like and subscribe or whatever. I've enjoyed it, and I'm just great meeting another filmmaker, especially a hybrid, which, so thank you so much.
Thanks, Chuck, for having me on. It was a pleasure.
It's an amazing thing, actually.
Diversity.
Cincinnati.
This is incredible.